first off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Hey everybody, Mike here from Creative Risk. Happy you guys are joining us. I just want to take a second before we start the episode to say thank you to people who've been emailing us and texting us who've really enjoyed the newsletter. We've gotten some really positive feedback on it, and it's, part of the process, right, is that we're putting out a lot of content, including this podcast, and, I want it to be an opportunity for me to digest and Joshua to digest and take in and think deeply about the things that are brought up in these episodes and in our content right alongside you, right? So it's not just about outputting and just trying to get shit out. It's a moment for us to slow down and sort of really examine what it is these episodes are bringing up, what the week is bringing up in terms of just takeaways about how to live sustainably as an artist in today's world. And it's been a really valuable experience for me, as I've been mainly writing them since Josh was in rehearsals. He's going to start, when he opens, to contribute as well. It's just been such a valuable process for me to just take in what is going on, and this episode today is just a great example of, everything is in flux in this business, everything is changing, and it's important sometimes to get out of a reactionary mode and actually examine these things, right, and what we think about them and what we're going to do about them. And so if you're not signed up already for our newsletter, this is kind of a pitch for that. Go to our Instagram or TikTok or whatever, social media, click the link in our bio. Our handle's at Creative Risk Pod. You can see that in the description, and you can sign up there. Or we also have a link in the description to sign up for our newsletter. We send them out weekly. And that's also a great way to know when these episodes drop as well. So just a recommendation there. But I'm really excited for today's episode with Lisa Zambetti, who's a casting director. And I'm just really impressed and humbled by Lisa's transparency. She was just really honest in this interview, which I really appreciated. So many people are full of shit in this business, especially in this moment where things are not the same and things are never going to be the same again. And, some people just put on a smiley face and just pretend like nothing's changing. But Lisa really is just honest about how all these changes are affecting her and, what she thinks the takeaways are. And, of course, we contribute there as well. So just to read Lisa's bio, Lisa Zambetti, CSA, is a 3-time Artios-nominated casting director for film, commercials, and video games. CBS Criminal Minds, she was the main casting director on that. Beyond Borders, FX's Reservation Dogs. She's cast projects for NBC Universal, ABC Studios, CBS Paramount, Netflix, FX, Amazon, Audible, and Skydance Interactive. She was just nominated for Video Game Casting Director of the Year by the TMA. The scripted podcast she cast starring Joseph Fiennes is on the Audible Original Best Podcast list for 2024. Lisa is an active member of the Equity and Entertainment Committee for the Casting Society. She is a Television Academy casting peer group leader. She is also on the advisory board for Hire Survivors Hollywood and is a proud local 399 union member. As an acting teacher, Lisa is on the faculty of UCLA, Chapman University, and Pace University, and she has also taught for USC, UC Santa Barbara, Cal State East Bay, Whitman College, and the Actor Studio MFA program in New York. Her coaching clients are on many currently airing TV shows and upcoming films. Lisa has a podcast of her own called Killer Casting, which is great, where she discusses her favorite films, TV, and issues in our industry, as well as interviewing creators. So without further ado, this is a doozy of an episode. We get into it real deep. Lisa Zambetti.
But I want to talk about something that I heard you speak to that is really interesting to me, and we talk about it a lot, and that is being able to understand your why we do this, why we choose these creative paths in this often, per this conversation, you know, brutal industry in a lot of ways. And so while we have our own perspective, I would love to hear your perspective on why you believe understanding your why in this industry is so important.
So what you're speaking of when I speak about that, it's really more in terms of scenes. That when I'm coaching a scene, I teach a lot. I do a lot of private clients. I got clients all over the TV right now. I'm so happy for them. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see made is people just they say their lines, they're going towards a big, heavy emotional moment, but they don't understand why they're there. They don't understand why their character walked in. So it's once you say, why are you here? Something clicks, right? But as far as, and those are simple things to fix, right? As far as being creative people, what is your why? The why is that we all have this affliction, disease. I don't know what it is, but it's something we cannot help. We can't help it. Our why, who cares what? We don't have a why. Because if you tried to explain why you would do this, you would be like immediately institutionalized because it doesn't make sense. The money doesn't make sense. The bandwidth, the hours, the years, the sacrifice, none of it makes sense if you are a business person looking at your return on investment. The why, it doesn't make any sense. And I try to, explain, like, I just remember very clearly when I went to San Jose State, woohoo, Spartans, or the Trojans, maybe they're Spartans, I don't know. When I went to San Jose State and I took my first theater appreciation class, right? And the teacher held it in the theater. We had to walk through the proscenium arch into the audience to sit for our first lecture. And I'm telling you guys, it was like I went into a church.
Yeah.
It was like I went into a cathedral. Like I walked from the backstage. I'd never been in a backstage before. Had to walk downstage, center stage. The lights are on my face. The audience is in the dark. And it was like there was this fog machine going on. I mean, it was like I heard angels. I mean, it was an absolute spiritual moment. And then I sat in the audience, and my teacher came on stage as this very enigmatic professor and took me through theater appreciation, where we had to watch, Chekhov and Moliere and Shakespeare, and I was like, there's nothing else I want to do. There's nothing else I want to do than learn how to be in these plays and learn how to produce them and learn how to direct them and learn how to write them. I mean, it was like a fever.
Do you still feel, especially because you're super interesting, right? Because you in particular, we're very close with actually similar. We went to school not at the same time with Tiffany Little Campfield, but Tiffany has a big theater background, and then primarily, obviously, was working in theater in New York before going to LA to focus on film and TV. But you have a big theater background as well as a performer, but in various aspects. Do you still, and now with such a focus on film and TV, do you still feel super connected to that moment that you describe as church?
You're going to understand this because you've grinded like I have. After a while, when you are dragging your bag of props up 8th Avenue in the snow, and you're tripping over crack vials, and your theater is like literally rat infested, after a while you're like, I may need to convert to a different religion. I mean, and I remember sitting in the theater, I think it was a Signature Theater, and I was in the front row, and I was watching a Nikki Silver play, and Patricia Clarkson was in it. It had an amazing cast. And I just remember thinking, I'm so close to this stage, but I could not be farther away.
Wow.
Like I can touch this stage with my hand, but I'm so far away from being cast in this play and being a performer. Even after, and I did work on Broadway. I was in a Broadway show. I was in off-Broadway shows. I ran theater companies. after a while, the grind of theater for me was just became overwhelming. And I looked at, you look at your life and the age that you're turning, and you don't have a house, you don't have kids, you don't have a partner. And it's like, I think something has to change. So kind of your why does change, but I wouldn't trade any of that, and I think it makes me a better casting director, and I can talk to writers on a totally different level than a lot of my colleagues. I'm sure that Tiffany feels this way too, because like I can talk about, Chekhovian pauses and weird thing and Pinter. We could talk about Pinter's punctuation, and we could talk about, all kinds of things that a lot of casting directors might not really understand about the writing process. But yeah.
Well, what's interesting about what you just said, and it's interesting because when you have a, like what I think you're talking about, because I would argue a lot of people are going through this in some respect, like especially actors, but I think all specialization is sort of being challenged right now in the theater, in Hollywood. I don't know if you agree with that, but this idea of like, oh, you can just be a casting director and just do that, and or you could just be an actor and just do that. Like, this isn't the 90s anymore, and it's like social media has democratized everything, and which I think is overall good. And this like sort of bureaucratic system is, and why do I say this in relation to what you're talking about? I say this because, do we love the art, or do we love the, for lack of a way of putting it, the industry? Like, arguably somebody could move to start a theater in Idaho if they really just loved the theater and they really just loved the art, but and potentially make a really great theater out there. But also what the disillusionment I feel like a lot of people feel and are feeling right now is, as the industry is struggling and sort of what we've put on the pedestal, like, oh, series regulars can't pay their rent anymore in New York or LA. It's like well, so now you have to come back to basics almost. It's not about all of the trappings of the industry success and milestones. You have to kind of come back to the creative center, because the industry is, I think we're in the fourth turning in a lot of respects. A lot of institutions, a lot of industries are really hurting right now. And this is an opportunity where we have to kind of touch back in. So yes, like what hasn't changed, I would argue, not to put words in your mouth, your why hasn't changed in a lot of ways, because you still know that you want to be close to our art and creativity and making creative output and telling stories. What that literally looks like has maybe shifted, but that deeper seated thing hasn't changed. For others that may look like, well, I'm going to stop trying to get seen for X and just build a YouTube channel and make my own stuff. Like, it's still an opportunity for me to be creative. And it's interesting. I just think what came up for me was just this idea of like the why is something deeper than just what it looks like at the end of the day. It's that feeling of adding creative output and telling stories into the world. I don't know. Sorry, it was kind of a long ramble. Weird.
No,
Yeah.
I love all that. I love all that. I think that there's so many things that you bring up. I mean, yeah, gone are the days of the kind of financial reward that you got when you were on Friends,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Or on Seinfeld. I mean, those days are gone, and because they're gone, I think the public maybe not realize that they're gone. And if you're a new actor and you kind of have stars in your eyes, and you just see the red carpets and you see the interviews on, Entertainment Tonight or Access Hollywood, like you don't really understand the grind that it takes
Right.
now to get to those places. And and that a successful actor is somebody who, and I go over these numbers with my students, and their minds are just blown. Like, I have a friend named Tony Robinette.
We know
who
Tony.
I consider
We chatted.
You know Tony?
Tony was maybe actually going to work with us at some point. So I met with him briefly. He's a sweetheart. I love Tony.
Great guy.
So we both teach for like the same studio, and I've coached him. I coached him for, a job that he got last year.
Awesome.
And, at some point it's like he was submitted like he had to be submitted like 200 or 300 times to get 100 self-tape requests to book 4 things.
Exactly.
And that's a successful year.
Yeah.
right? Just think about that kind of output and effort. And he's got agents in a lot of different markets, and that helps his grind. And so I think that people just don't quite understand, because we're all such
Yeah.
we're all such consumers of entertainment. We kind of think we know how that entertainment comes to us, or how those people get on the screen, or how their voices get in the commercials that we're watching. But the actual grind of it is so different than I think what a lot
And
of
what's
people think.
wild too, just to even take it to this, it's like, the red carpet interviews, all of these things, like, not to be rude, but like, who watches the Oscars anymore? Who watches the Golden Globes? Who watches the Emmys? And I say this to say that it's not that it doesn't make it important, but it's like, what's weird about this moment is there's an opening up, right? It's like, not only are the financial rewards not as well there, but also like the cultural impact
Yeah.
is actually not, because there's not a monopoly anymore on entertainment,
Right.
right? So it's like, and so, and that's why it's really interesting that you even have this podcast. Like, I'm not saying that, completely like, well, don't completely fuck the industry. It's like, if you love elements, if you love the business, if you love the game of it, by all means play it. But even you have a need to have a direct relationship to an audience through your podcast. Like, even you like, who are like
Mhm.
within the industry, it's so interesting to talk to you, to be like, well, I also like want to have a direct relationship with people out in the world, and not just
Mhm.
rely on sort of this thing that will maybe put my work out there. It's hard. Like, that, not only is the grind harder than ever, it's also like the financial rewards, the impact rewards of like actually making a difference and reaching people are less and less. And it doesn't make it not important. Like, it doesn't make it.
I want to ask you both a
Yeah.
question that I've been thinking about over the past couple days. So, what do you think is the nobler thing? And I'm going to ask you this, and I don't know if I can articulate this. When I think about when I was in New York, and you go to a Broadway show, and it's lots of tourists and out of towners or New Yorkers, but you start going to an off Broadway and off Broadway show. Who is the audience?
It's like,
It's actors.
yeah, it's all
It's
actors.
actors, it's
It's a
creators,
little
right?
echo
So it's the
bubble.
actors who are keeping that economy going.
Yes.
But if you go to places like the Denver Center, where that's where I trained at the Denver Center Theater Company, who's in the audience? Denverites, right?
100%.
Every walk of life. If you come to the Bay Area, my mom and her little girlfriends go to the theater constantly.
100%.
They go out. They really support their community theater. They're game to go up to they live in little suburbs. They're game to go up to San Francisco and see something. Like, the community theater, I think,
100%.
is incredible. And we kind of look down at it as like the lesser than, like that's not the noble, that's not the dream, when it's really where all the things that we think that we want to be as artists, that's where it's happening. I don't know. What do you
Well,
I
think about
completely. Well, Joshua, sorry, you go.
well,
This is actually an argument we've been not an argument, but a discussion we've been having a lot recently. Yeah.
I ran a theater for about 7 years in DC, and it was the most fulfilling, challenging time of my life, right? Because I was working nonstop. I was working full time as a performer, but they didn't care that I was also running my theater. So I was like producing these, I dream up shows, and then the board would make it happen, and that was amazing, and
it? Yeah, yeah.
it was incredible. And one of the reasons why I moved to New York was to join a Broadway show where I made good money for sure, but it's fascinating because I do believe that I have been sucked into a industry quote unquote bubble that whether it's the guest stars and the next Broadway show, and I'm sorry, but who gives a fuck? Because I'll say that show that I moved for was the worst creative experience of my life because it was a machine. And I talk openly about it because it was so unfulfilling to me in so many ways, even though it was this lifelong dream. And to the point of what Mike was saying about what the conversation we have a lot, it's like, where do we as independent artists, doesn't matter, casting, actors, directors, producers, writers, but especially actors are fall victim to this idea of this industry that, to your point, Lisa, is going to somehow pave the way to this starry, lucrative future, when in fact, when we get caught up in the empty promises, especially in this late stage capitalism, especially in 2025 with the advent of socials, da 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 da, it is a slippery, dangerous slope. So I know I'm on a diatribe here from the question you asked, but how it resonates. I'm about to go do a show in North Carolina on Sunday, and this was a theater I've worked at before, and one of the things I love about it is because it's a theater that strives for excellence while also supporting the community that supports it. You feel like you're getting as much as you're giving, and there's a real healthy quid pro quo, unlike in these major markets where we just sort of fall prey to I would call it soulless, lifeless art more often than not. Sorry to be so preachy about it.
No, the noble version of operating within an industry bubble, like the way you can spin that is like, I'm an artist's artist, I guess, right? It's like, that's the way you can sort of spin it, or I'm an actor's actor or something, which I think is like, we both went to conservatory, and there was something certainly within me, sort of this elitist mentality of that, of like, well, fuck the general public. I just want to be well respected among my artist peers.
Yes.
And so what's, it's funny, like similarly, I just did my first like professional musical act, which was wild. Like I'm at Gulf Shore Playhouse, like in Naples, Florida. And it's like great cast, great people. But there, there's a little bit of disdain. It was all New Yorkers, a little bit of disdain for the community, a little bit. It's like, and the reason why it bothers me is because I don't, if there is one thing, I sorry, I keep harping on it, but like, we are in a bubble. Yeah. And it's like, who are we doing this so that we can get external validation from gatekeepers or from artists, or are we actually trying to reach people in the world? Like, not to be rude, like, I have a friend who like has a movie going to Sundance, and even he was like, yeah, but like, he was kind of like, low key, who cares? Like, he kind of said like, who's gonna see the movie? Like a bunch of like fancy people, like it's a bubble. Like, will the masses see it? Will the public see it? It's like, so what's the reason why it bothers me now more than ever? Of course, there's resentment and bitterness. Like, yes, Josh and I both work fairly consistently. We're not stars or like anything like that. So there's some resentment. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that doesn't exist. But why it bothers me is because it always feels like I'm trying to be led into a club, as opposed to making shit that people see and connect with. So, and that's why this bubble stuff. And again, if this bubble had more of a cultural impact, then it would make sense. If this bubble could get me in front of people, then it would make sense. But I can do that now with my phone. So it's like, why? Am I just trying to be accepted into the cool kids club? Or like, so it's a good question. Like, what is more noble? In my opinion, what is more noble is to make work for people that people see that people see. That,
and maybe noble was not a great word, but what is success, right? What is more successful to be? And I say this to my students all the time. I give this example. There was a wonderful one-person play at the Geffen last year.
Every Brilliant Thing.
Every Brilliant Thing. And the brilliant actor who was in it,
Daniel
it was a
Daniel
tour
K. Isaac. He's great. Yeah.
So it was a tour de force, right? This kid must have been fucking exhausted after every show because it's a totally interactive. It's just him. It's a one-person show. And he was brilliant in it. He probably got, I want to guess, I tried to look this up, like $800 a week.
Sure.
At the Geffen, like one of the premier platforms for theater in Los Angeles. And he also was a co-star on Billions, right? I don't know. What
Recurring,
is he, 10th on the call sheet?
Yeah.
I don't know. But
still,
and maybe he wasn't in every episode. Maybe he had one or two scenes in each episode. He made way more on that show than he did starring in a play at the Geffen, right? So what, and that's why I tell my students, your return on your investment, only you know what that is. Only you can
It's a great
define what
point.
success is, what the most noble thing is. Because for somebody who's been training their whole life, doing the play obviously is going to fulfill a huge thing for you.
Yeah.
However, your mom is going to be able to brag that you were in a scene with what's the fuck red haired, I can't remember his name. Oh my God,
Yeah.
please cut this. That you were in a scene in Billions with, oh God,
Paul
I can't remember his
Giamatti?
name.
Damien, I want to say Damien, it's like something.
Oh, I'm gonna have to resign my casting
Isn't it
credit
Paul
card.
Giamatti?
Um, anyway, you know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
sure.
She's going to be able to tell her friends, like, look, my son,
Yeah.
he made it. He's in a scene on an HBO show, So it's just, it can really mind fuck you.
It
You know
so
what I mean?
can. Yeah.
Well,
It's a great
just I want
point.
to say one more thing about the audience, though. Thing per what you were just saying, Mike. One of the things, and again, we're having macro concept conversation here, which we love. When we talk about Trump winning, all politics aside, he was focused on primarily alternative forms of media. A. B, one of the things that we would talk about with socials is that part of what it means to be alive now is the ability to cultivate your own audience. So with your true crime podcast or with your, you have, it's not, because one of the things we also have to talk about is the death of specialization in all of this, about how the actor, the writer, Daniel's a great example. I've known Daniel for a long time. Daniel does a lot of things. Daniel is a writer and an actor, and that's because that's sort of the somewhat part of the shifting landscape in all of this. And social media in particular has obviously, you have to see it, especially Lisa, in so many ways, changed the game forever. Yeah. So when we say new actors, Mike and I, we took over the business course this last semester at UNCSA. So we were working with the seniors there, somewhat talking about this, who I think do have a different perspective than when we went, at least when I went to school, Lisa. I think Mike might have had socials. We didn't have social media, Lisa. You didn't have.
But it was still like you're going to graduate and join an acting troupe. That was still sort of. It's like, oh, okay, that's
But I guess the thing is like it's because you said new actors, but the schools are still stuck there. The schools are still stuck in the idea, at least where we went to our conservatory, of a trade mentality. You learn your skill and you go out into the world, and then fucking what? So sorry, I want to keep going on this for a second, and we have to bleep this name, Mike, but because Lisa will know this person too. But I want it for context. When I was in school, was a year or two above me, and he called me a couple weeks ago, and he's been making gobs of money, and he goes, not only do I not want to do this anymore, this this piece of the puzzle, the industry as I know it, but I don't know actually how to do anything else, and I feel completely trapped and stuck, meaning I don't know how to play the social game. I want to make my own work, but I don't even. He was questioning.
He wants
his
more
own
agency. Yeah,
he's like, I don't even know what my point of view as an artist is right now in this moment.
Yeah.
And this is what going back to this idea of industry bubble. It's because obviously again our slant in all of this is looking in a lot of ways at the sustainability of the modern artist, and getting and see. I know we barely know each other, Lisa, but I think it's clearly innate in you for you to change coasts and to pick up and then to build a successful career, for you to build your own successful podcast, for you to be the coach and person that you are a natural entrepreneur. But most artists are not that, or they don't have yet to cultivate that.
Yeah. Well, they're not taught to cultivate that, Joshua. I mean, you know that because, like you said, the old school mentality is like, look, how do most actors come up? They come up because they're kid models, right?
Yeah,
that's
a lot of
100% true. 100% true.
Right? They get into a little modeling thing. They get in their little thing, and they do a local commercial for the local, furniture store or whatever, or they get in a catalog, and then they get in plays, and they get a lot of accolades and a lot of encouragement, and they do their community theater play, and they're not, it's just not the real reality. And what's really sad is that when some of my some of my students graduate, especially the women. This business is hard on everybody, but for women, it's really cruel. And you have these early 20s women graduating, and they think that they're going to graduate and immediately start getting cast as early
Yep.
20 something
Yep.
roles. And the fact of the matter is that there are people in line before them, and these are the 9-year-olds, the 10-year-old girls, the 12-year-old girls who have come up and done a somebody's daughter on this sitcom, and somebody's here, and they've gotten the trust of people like Lillian Field and Bernie, Telsey and all this stuff. And now it's their turn to be the guest star or the series regular. Now, can some of those female graduates graduating from the top schools, can they break in? Of course they can. That's always the crapshoot, and that's always the dream. But they don't quite understand how long of a line there is already that they're behind, right? And that's really tough. And that these, some of these young actresses have already done, they've already made a lot of money in commercials. They've already, done they've met tons and tons of producers and directors who will keep using them over and over and over again. I worked for a huge casting director who had 4 shows on at the time, and she just recycled all of the actors on all the shows she was casting,
So no, keep going, Lisa. Sorry.
No, that's what I'm going to say. So I don't think that they're ready to understand what the game really is,
Well, I guess as a follow-up for you though, because it's innate, so you might not even be aware. How do you personally balance your own artistic sensibilities with the business? We could say primarily of casting. And I guess kind of as a follow-up to, what do you consider the creative elements of your work as casting, and what do you consider the business side of that?
Oh my God. So, I get approached just because I worked on a long running procedural show that had a lot of violence in it. Sometimes I get approached by a lot of horror genre stuff, which is fine. I don't mind that. But, I have to be in love with the script or see something really unique in the script. So that's kind of where I have to draw my own lines, because I was approached by something just not too long ago, and I didn't have a job at the time. And it was this script that was just incomprehensible. Like, I was like, I don't even understand anything in this script. Not in a good way. Like, not in a everything everywhere all at once.
Right. Yeah, not Christopher Nolan.
No, it was like a Western that didn't know what it wanted to be. And it was just a bunch of cowboys blazing their guns. It had no had no artistic quality at all. But they wanted to back up the money truck and give me a really good fee to do it and to try to attach people. And I'm like, I cannot reach out to UTA and WME and whoever and sell this pile of shit, no matter how much money they have, no matter. And so that's kind of where I have to, and what do I do instead? I do these tiny little films for AFI and Film Independent that are exquisite little gems that really don't pay me much, but they get nominated for all these awards, and I'm so proud. I mean, I was nominated for an award for this little film I did that was about something that nobody writes about, which is about a Black child with Down syndrome. You know how hard it is to find a kid with Down syndrome who's Black, whose parents will let him be the lead of something that is really hard, And then I just cast this true story of this drag queen story hour. This drag queen, it's a true story of Kyle Casey Chu, who was attacked while reading a story to a bunch of children. These anarchists or activists descended upon this little library with guns and masks and scared the shit out of all these kids and chased him and tried to intimidate him. And the police showed up and were on their side and didn't protect him. I mean, so those are the stories that are really important to me, that I really want to help bring to life. And whether I get a big fee for it or not, or whether it gets nominated for an award or not, that's definitely what keeps me going. But yeah, do I want to be working on the same things that Tracy and Tiffany and Bernie are working on? Yeah. And I look at some of the things that have casting directors that are, casting some actors that I helped them
Yeah.
get cast in their first thing, their first co-star, their first guest star, their first series regular. And it's like I see those people go on to have, amazing careers, and yet I'm not sort of in the running for those big network shows. That's tough. That's
Sure.
tough for me to sort of swallow, because it's like I'm here and I'm finding, if I can find a little boy in the wilds of Alabama to play a role of a 8-year-old black boy with Down syndrome, and fly him to LA for his first job, and have his family be so proud that he's the star of a small film. I mean, if I can do that, I mean, I can do anything. I will not stop until I find the right people for
I'm
something.
going to say something a little controversial, which maybe it's not controversial. I don't know. But that's maybe I think that's kind of the future of casting. Here's what I mean by that. Maybe you would really disagree with this. As this industry changes, as people are more findable, it's funny. We were talking to a manager in the city here, and she was like, "To be honest with you, in 10 years, I don't know how relevant agents and managers are going to
Oh
be.
yeah, she
How
did say
needed."
that. That's right.
She was like, "I don't even know." It's like, to be honest with you, like managers may be a little different, but like in terms of just getting people seen by casting, like here's why I say this. A job that is truly hard, finding gems, true gems for true artistic projects, that's actually a very difficult task when it comes to and yes, attaching big names, yes, that's also, but at the same time, that might become easier, not easier, but with the changing game, with marketing changing, with celebrity changing, with all of these things, is the future of casting actually about finding the true diamonds in the rough out there that cannot be found through traditional means? Because as opposed to being just a broker for either which is what casting is a lot of times, is being a broker to get a name talent to do an indie project. How relevant is that going to be in 10 years, frankly? Or just casting stars in TV shows. People will be able to find people easier. They'll be able to reach people easier. Maybe I'm just presuming this, but actually it sounds like the artistic merit that you're bringing to this, and finding these diamonds, and truly finding the right person out there in the world, the unknowns. This is probably more of the relevancy that casting is going to have in the future. Do you agree with that? Am I completely talking out of my ass? I don't
No,
know.
I think that no, I think that that's true. And with AI has really changed everything, because I can, ask ChatGPT who are the top 5 actresses, insert whatever the criteria is that we should be looking at for this market to have the biggest bang for our buck,
Yeah.
and it will figure that out. And
Right.
there always what were those kinds of tools that studios used to put together their own lists. When you're doing a big studio movie, they have their lists already, and
Right.
so those kinds of things, as you're sort of intimating, are not as interesting. Yeah, it's really cool to put Meryl Streep in something. It's really cool to put Carrie Coons and very well-known actors and things, and do that kind of chessboard about who
Yeah.
should be in this role, and what's the return, and what's the market that they appeal to. And that's but to me, that's not casting. That's not reading actors and really getting their vibe, and matchmaking, and falling in love with people, and finding their skills, and seeing how they shine. And I'm really worried about, you guys, is because I work in the video game industry.
Right.
I was approached by a really big video game company to do a job that was basically just scanning actors to do, large language learning, generative AI. Because what their plan is to get rid of co-stars.
Right.
And they can right now. I mean, I was given a beta access to a beta program that's kind of like Sora AI. and I just put in a breakdown. I put in, okay, show me a, multi-ethnic, 20-something female, friendly, cool barista, and it generated a photo fucking realistic actor that if I paid a little bit of money, I could type in the lines I wanted her to say, tell the accent I wanted her to speak them in, the kind of voice I wanted her to have, and she would say, "Sir, here's your coffee," or double latte for Damien, or
Right.
whatever.
Wild.
I mean, that's where we are, right? And that's what I'm worried. I'm not so much worried about people getting rid of the series regulars or the big stars,
Right.
but these little roles that lead that really keep actors fed and clothed and housed and insured. Um, I'm really worried that those are going to go away, because once the studios know that, okay, instead of hiring 3 nurses to say this line, this line, this line, they can have their FX people just generate those. That's what I'm really
Well,
worried about,
it's
that because
I really appreciate you talking about this because
Yeah.
I have mixed.
Josh, I think, has just lost his mind.
Well,
He's
it's wild. I mean, I have to be as a card carrying SAG member. I have mixed feelings about this. Like, of course, it's terrifying. Of course, yes, and I don't. But here's why I feel mushy washy about it. I'll just be 100% honest with you. It's like, look at the Industrial Revolution. Like, look at the arts and crafts movement, the Industrial Revolution, right? It's like this idea, right, that as technology advances, like, artisans, people who built furniture, like, were all put out of work. And then it actually became bougie. To get a handcrafted cabinet was a luxury that only like certain people could afford. And this is where this idea of like high quality, this is human made, it's like and now it becomes only for the top 1%, right, of like people, because a guy, working class person, is just going to get a dresser that was made from IKEA or whatever the hell. I mean, this is later than that. And so I say all this because I don't really have a formulated thought here, but it's like, what is this? What do these technological advances do? How do they change the game? And importantly, yes, there is an element, and that's what we fought for, is like preserving the old way. But overall, you can't stop the march of progress, and so what needs to change? Like, what I take away from what you're saying, unfortunately, is that you need to be playing a bigger game. It's not just about being a working actor anymore, because that's not going to exist. Like, a working actor in the sense of like, who's not a celebrity, is not going to exist probably in 10, 15 years if we go at this rate.
Well, this is my point,
yeah.
Mike, about this is what I'm trying to get at, about like essentially what is our job? What is our job in this moment? So let's take those, Lisa, these beginning actors who often would have gone like, oh, I'm going to get my co-stars, and then I'm going to get my Then you go, well, so where do they put their time and energy? And part of what we argue, and I please feel free to agree or disagree, is that make your own art, grow your own fucking audience. Use the tools, use the advent of socials. Mike described, social media, which is one of obviously the largest capitalistic tools around today, business tools to sell. But to as an opportunity to get your art out there. Is that where you channel your focus on amassing an audience so that you can even be considered for what would those series regulars down the road.
Exactly. Skipping co-stars and guest stars because you've grown enough of a persona and brand. And I'm not saying this is easy but is this actually the future path to sustainability to be a working actor? Do you need to actually grow an audience and a persona yourself, so that you are a celebrity somewhere? And as these things become more relevant than mainstream entertainment, does then the mainstream entertainment industry come to you, and do you skip all those steps almost? Because working your way up the ladder is not really something that's going to potentially exist anymore. Sorry to cut you off there, Josh.
Well, I can tell you just in terms of casting a long running $1 billion asset series, the difference between a co-star and a guest star is budget. That's it. Because
Right.
if a writer hands me a script and there are 20 roles in it, and I've only got 60K to cast those 20 roles, not everybody's going to be a guest star,
Right.
even if it's a huge role, right? So, and I mean, I think that those, and I do think that co-star roles are really important. That you don't get this, you don't get the time in front of the camera without those,
Right.
right? You don't get the savviness, you don't get the nuance, you don't get the comfortability with being on a set with series regulars without being the sir, here's your coffee, Mr. Gary Sinise, or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not something that you can really replicate by yourself in your bathroom doing TikTok videos, and as somebody who has been forced to cast a lot of influencers on certain things, it's a really, I think you bring up a really interesting point about progress and furniture making and all that stuff. But think about it, mass furniture making, IKEA benefits the consumer, right? Because then we get to have nice looking furniture that falls apart
Yes.
but looks nice and we can afford it because it's passed on to the consumer. It doesn't get eliminating an entire generation of actors doesn't help the consumer, right? It's not going
Interesting.
to
Yeah.
make things cheaper. Like the studio is not going to, they're just going to keep getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier.
That's a great
Now
point.
on the other hand, I do really appreciate independent filmmakers and how hard it is. Like I just watched this independent film, and I'll send you the link if you want to put it in your show notes, a completely AI generated film, short film. I think it's called The Stages of Man, and it's breathtaking. And it's got, I mean, there's got to be like 30 roles in it of unbelievable looking character actors who are acting, and they are not actors, they are replicants, they are digital replicas, but you would never know, you would never in a million years know. And it looks incredible, and they were putting people in the Arctic Circle and in caves and being chased by lions, and I mean it was cinematically stunning. And to be able to do that with real humans would be impossible. I mean, this is like $100,000, it would be $100,000 shoot at least,
Right.
or more. And this creator probably did it for, I don't know, whatever it costs
Like
to do the program.
$2,000
You know what I
or
mean?
something. Wild.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Sure.
And I'll show it to you, and you'll be amazed at the acting that is, quote unquote, folks, acting that is being done by these digital replicants.
Yeah.
I mean, you would never in a million years know that these were not humans.
Well, what's interesting is I think you make a phenomenal point about it benefiting the consumer, because it's funny. I've been thinking about this. It's like it may or may not benefit the consumer because, per your point, if these films are just as effective or just as artful as a movie with humans, what difference does the consumer know? However, here's what I don't think it benefits. It doesn't benefit humanity. I would argue that because I don't know how to change a tire. So I don't know how to make cobble wood. When we had to do when things were not, the more convenient things get, the less interesting, involved, cultured, informed humanity is, right? So I would argue that probably as all of this stuff gets moved to technology, like in the short term, it probably will be more beneficial in some ways, potentially for the larger public beyond the artists, because now somebody else can make art. Somebody else can figure out a way to tell their story that they want to tell, and da 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 da. But however, the more convenient things are, the stupider we get a lot of times. It's like, and the less well-rounded we are as humans. So, and the more reliant we are on technology to do it for us, there are probably an artistic spirit will probably be lost in humanity as a whole. Maybe, I don't know. It's fascinating though.
Well, it makes live performance really important
Exactly.
for sure. It does
Yeah.
turns the focus right back on what we were just talking about: local theater, live
Exactly.
theater, things that you cannot get in our little screens and boxes.
Well,
and live theater, that's sorry, I'm talking too much, but you're I like this conversation. Joshua's gonna punish me later. I'll be in timeout. But I and theater, that's not just a replication of a movie. And I'm not just talking about IP.
Pull that mic back.
I know, sorry. A theater that's not just like, I'm not talking even about IP. I'm talking about like when you see theater that's so, that could be a, why did this have to be a play?
Well, Anne Bogart talks about that she doesn't want
My
to do
queen.
theater that's about me, our apartment, our couch, and our problems.
Right.
Because you don't need live theater to do that, because you've got plenty of sitcoms that do that really well.
Do you know, this conversation is really makes me worried, specifically for the modern film and television actor.
Joshua is a robot, by the way. He is actually he is a cyborg. So he's feeling called out here.
No, but it really does make me worried about it, because of so much of what you're talking, and getting back to the point about Daniel and making $800 doing Geffen, and then needing to go do Billions, which obviously has probably, he's never said it to me, but probably been a good gift for him to sustain himself. But Mike, I might have even said it to you that while I've done some television, too, like I do, my career is primarily in the theater, and I'm grateful for it. And in some plays for this reason, because that can't necessarily be recreated, even though they're trying as well. Lisa, though, for you, what would then you say are some of the biggest challenges for casting directors in this fast-paced, do it quicker, make us more money? What are some of the challenges that you are facing? Because, and it's not to be tangential, but I want to say one thing. Bleep his name. Our friend who works in casting as well, alongside the friends we were talking about earlier. I didn't realize this. Not a full-time job, employed when they're on a project, even with that massive casting office, right? And he got 2 kids, talks just like you, talks about it a lot, about the challenges that come along with that. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you are facing right now as a casting person?
Well, I don't know if I should not talk like this, but I'm part of a lot of professional organizations that get together to support each other and stuff like that. And I heard that recently the New York branch of this organization that I'm part of had a Zoom meeting, just sort of a supportive meeting. And there were 15 casting directors on that call. And all 15 of them had been out of work, some of them for years.
Wow.
And these are people who are way more successful than I am,
Wow.
So that I have mentors here in Los Angeles who have been on major series, who have been executives at studios who aren't working, and who are just like have now had 2 pilot seasons come and gone, that they're sort of incredulous that they haven't been on a pilot. Now, I'm kind of used to that. Like, I'm used to getting the crumbs from the table, and I'm happy for those crumbs. But, as a casting professional, when you see people who you are your mentors, who you admire so much, who haven't had insurance in years, or who are just really starving, and you see other casting offices who are really absorbing the majority of the jobs. When you see an office that's got 2, 3, 4 television shows, that's $7,000 a week times 4 for those offices, roughly speaking. Now, and you can't blame people for taking work, because episode orders are shorter and shorter, right? Where when I was on my big network show, I had 22 episodes, which got most of my year. I was on this show for years and years and years, and now you're having orders of 10, 12, 6, 8,
Right.
So it makes sense that you've got to sort of I hate the word people say they're hoarding jobs. I don't think they're hoarding jobs, but they're certainly not turning down work, because it's a feast or famine kind of situation.
Exactly.
But when you see the same offices having multiple television shows, multiple films, yes, do they deserve those jobs? And they have these long-standing
Yeah.
relationships with studios and networks and certain producers. Yeah, sure. But I think what hurts us is when there's a new filmmaker or a new showrunner who doesn't have those relationships, and we're not getting a chance at those
Yeah.
jobs. And I think that's where a lot of my colleagues who are kind of my level, who we've had some success, but we're definitely hand to mouth, and we've had to pivot. I do scripted podcasts, I do video games, I do whatever somebody comes to me with.
Right.
That's what's hard. But actors go through that all the time. It's very much like being an actor, but it's very disappointing because when you have a concentration of work in very few offices, and that those casting directors, look, they've got a bunch of associates, as they've got a
Mm.
bunch of assistants, as
Some of whom, by the
that
way, do the work. Do
oh
do the bulk
100%.
of the work. Speaking of my
100%.
well, I know for sure.
Wow.
And the thing is that they don't even want to. A lot of networks and studios don't even want to pay for the associates and the assistants anymore. Like I haven't had when I was on a big network show, I had 2 assistants and 2 associates and a partner, and now it's like I actually compete hard for jobs because I don't have those things. They don't have to pay for those things. I do it all myself. I set up all the appointments. I set up all the Zooms. I put out all of the self-tape requests. I do my
Wow.
own breakdowns. I do everything myself. It's not, I mean, not hard. It's not like, being a carpenter or being a plumber,
No, but
but
it's this it's this idea too of like concentration. This is what's happening, right? That's what technology does, is it widens the gap and it concentrates. It's what you said. It concentrates wealth and opportunity with a very small group of people. That's what this does, because you don't need as many people potentially to get the job done. And so for people, I would not even, who are not in the 1.01% echelon, because that's the thing, is like, listen, I would argue that you are in a top echelon because you have experienced success that not many people get to experience in this lifetime. You know what I mean? And so it is. But when we're talking about the 0.01% echelon, it's like it makes us have to run a scrappier operation in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Now, wait. So here's what's coming up for me, Lisa, because we don't know each other very well. I'm so taken with your openness, your intelligence, your
100%.
your humility, your own creativity. And the reason I'm saying I'm taken with it is we all know many folks, specifically in casting, some of whom are dear friends of mine and very kind. And actually, the person I'm talking about, went to school with us as an actor in particular. And I'm wondering, is that what it is, Lisa? Like, is part of what your unique, creative, humble, honest approach, is it stem from your own experience very much on the other side? Is that just who you are? Where does that come from for you?
Oh my God, this is such a sweet thing to say. I don't even know how to respond to that. I mean, I don't know if there's any. I don't know if I'm particularly sweet or humble or any of those things. I'm as big a bitch as anybody. But
You're transparent. You're transparent, which is
Yeah.
which
well,
is very hard to
I think
find.
that when I was an actor like you, Joshua, and like you, Mike, when I was, walking up and down Seventh Avenue and taking a train here and there, trying to, like, it wasn't transparent.
Mm.
It was a big fucking mystery on
Mhm.
how things got cast and how to get an agent and how, this is a podcast about risk. So I wrote my own off-Broadway play and cast myself in it and got my own agent and then got a shot at Broadway. And then, um so I feel like it's really important, and this is the age that we're in, where we can be transparent. I mean, I never knew what any of these casting directors looked like before until we had social media, and they've got Instagram accounts, and now I know what Avi Kaufman looks like. I remember going to her office to deliver something from Billy. So I work for Billy
Mhm.
Hopkins. If you know New
Mhm.
York, you know Billy Hopkins. I was working for him, and he had to deliver something to Avi, and like I went to her office, and it was like the fucking Secret Service. Like it was all like smoky glass, and I like handed this envelope. They opened the door just wide enough for the hand to come through and like take the envelope I had, and then and it shut really quickly, and I was like, what was that? What is this? Like you just, there was so many gatekeepers and guard posts, and like you really, and now it's just very different where you just have a lot more access
Right.
and a lot more transparency. I think that that's really important to destigmify, demystify the process,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
If you had to describe, and thank you for this conversation, it's we always have a somewhat of a structure for these things, and this has taken us in a bunch of different places. So listeners as well, thanks for going along on the ride. But what if you had to describe your ideal vision for the future of the industry in casting? What does that look like for you?
I mean, I think just letting producers bring for example, I do a lot of first time filmmakers stuff,
Yeah.
right? And we'll do something, and the thing that they create gets a lot of accolades. I've had things go to Sundance and stuff like that. They start to hit, and it makes sense that you would bring everybody who helped you hit with you,
Of
right?
course.
But that's not really what's happening. What's happening is they start to hit, and then they get a bigger agent, and that agent represents this other really big casting director, or their agent is best friends with this studio exec, and that studio exec is best friends with this other big person. Or like they want the casting director that cast Star Wars, or they have these they don't bring the people with them
Mm.
that supported them. So in my ideal future is that we're just a lot more loyal to each other, and your word is your bond, and you're willing to stand up for the people that were there for you, and who fought for you, and who fought for your cast, and who like cut their own salary to make something happen for you. Like I want that level of loyalty and transparency. And if um and the humanity of it, right? I want more humans. I want more human. I
Well,
want less digital replicas and less
yeah.
AI and less of all that, and more humans.
Here's why I think that's gonna happen. Like,
Tell
I
me.
think people will be more loyal. I'll speak for myself. I've been having this experience more. Not that I've never been not loyal, but I think there is a disillusionment with, like, I don't care. It's like, why is smoky office now? It's like, who cares? I'm not trying to be, but like, who actually cares? All we are is artists trying to make shit, and like, these status symbols are disappearing, in my personal opinion. So it's like, so I have become less and less caring about that, and more, like, more and more I'm like, fuck trying to reach these people. I'm more interested in the people I worked with here or there who are great artists and who I got along with creatively, because these status people I'm chasing after, of course it matters, but it matters less than it ever has before. It's like, it matters less than it ever has mattered before. It's like, as anybody, people care about people now more than ever before out in the world. They don't care about actors or celebrities or anything like this. So I have felt in myself, frankly, a strong shift in this direction of, I don't care about reaching these people just because they're fancy in the business. I care about, and I feel like other people are experiencing this too, like, because that's all we have. If the status symbols don't matter as much, all we have are great artists, great collaborators who we work well with. That's all we have. I don't know.
Yeah, I wish that were true, and I hope that that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to change, but I would. I've just had so many times where something has been cock blocked for me, and not just for me, for a lot of
Sure.
people, because the person that you championed, your director, your writer, whatever, were you know just deflected to a more famous casting director, or a more famous situation.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And it's
Yeah.
hard not to be like, well, I'm just sounding really bitter and sour
You don't
grapesy,
sound
and
bitter to
and
me. No.
um and I love to collaborate with people. I'd love to work with. I mean, I'll love to. It's a very, and the thing right now with casting is very isolating, because I cast things out of my house, out of my bedroom,
Right.
with my dog and my kids around me, and so it's always nice to be collaborating with people
Right.
and bringing something to their table too. So
Well,
anyway.
Lisa, I actually I feel very hopeful after this conversation. I really do.
I do too,
I do
actually.
because the wonderful Tara Rubin, who you might know from she's a good friend and has always been another person who in the industry I'm like, my God, like she just every time I get to work with her, collaborate on anything, I love it because she's so full of heart and so open herself. And not just with casting, with all elements of this industry. Sometimes that can be hard to come by. And so, thank you for
You're an
yes,
artist who cares.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's why it was an uplifting
Yeah.
conversation for me, is because
Yeah, you
we're all
care.
aware of these scary things but also when we have transparent conversations with people like you who I could tell actually give a shit about making good art and are trying to figure it out alongside all of us. That's why it's inspirational to me, because I just think there is some brighter future ahead. I don't know what it looks like. I don't think it looks like what it's looked like for the past 100 years. I don't think it looks like that, but I think that there is an opportunity for all of us to create art still that matters. And I did get that from this conversation, listening to you talk about it, because you're one of those people. I really, I'm not trying to blow smoke, like I mean that. So
Oh, well, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
where can people find you, Lisa? Because I know you offer a lot. Where can people find your cast if they were interested in working? Because I was actually on your site. I saw you were doing a video game up class, I think, actually for actors. But where can people find you?
so cool.
Yeah, so if you keep track of me on Instagram at Lisa Zambetti Casting, I try to just do all my stuff there. And
Great.
when I'm offering, I do teach every, a couple times a year, a video game, in-person video game acting class, which is a whole lot of fun, especially if you feel like you're not somebody who moves well. Video games are for you.
Mike?
I mean, they're
Just kidding. I know.
I'm
I'm just kidding. I'm just
What
kidding.
are you
I'm
talking
kidding.
about? I'm great. Anyway.
Yeah, and I teach a great procedural class on how to play a cop, how to play a doctor, how to play a victim, how to play a villain, how to play a psychopath. I mean, these are genres that are very much in my wheelhouse.
Right,
I think
right.
I've cast over like 500 psychopaths, but anyway, and I have a podcast called Killer Casting that is just me talking about whatever I want, kind of like you guys, like whatever's on my mind, whatever I'm obsessed with. And I'd love for you guys to come on when you're watching something that is like lighting you up, or if you're in something, you want to promote something, come on and we can talk about it. But yeah, find me on Instagram and we'll chat.
Thanks, friends. A bunch of stuff will be in the show notes. Oh, wait. No. We have to do comfort food performances. Sorry.
Oh, shit. Whoa.
So
What?
Lisa, every episode we end with comfort food performances, which is for you and for our listeners, basically where we name a specific performance that we love and could come back to time and time again. I know it can mean a lot of different. For me, it's just a favorite performance. And Mike's, it's usually Jean-Claude Van Damme or Tom Cruise. So we'll just wait a performance for one of those. But
No,
I'll
it's not gonna be
start
this time.
because Michael, my partner, and Michael, we watched Sunset Boulevard again last night, which is why I've seen it 4 or 5 times.
Such a good movie.
And so I know it's a little basic, but I do have to say something about Gloria Swanson's performance in this. It is almost, and I mean this as a compliment, clownish, which I would argue is a bit, probably Billy Wilder's vision for Norma Desmond to some extent, because she's so delulu. But what I love about it is how free and big and bold it was. And yet there's this moment where she's early on when he comes to her house and she's talking with him and she's sitting on the couch, and even though it's so big, there's this moment where she's popped with something and she just sort of sharply like directs a thought at him. And the reason I'm bringing up that simple specific moment is because truth comes in all shapes and sizes. And I think sometimes for film and TV in particular, we almost think like, oh, we should do nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, let's get really song, you'll barely hear me. And Gloria Swanson's performance was so theatrical and so amazing to me. So Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard is my comfort food performance for this episode.
That's good. I watched RRR again. I had to show my parents. Do you guys know what
No.
RRR is? So it's actually the biggest movie in the world in like 2022. It's a Telugu. I'm not gonna say it. It's a movie from India. It's not Bollywood. It's like the other. It's a different language than I believe Hindi. But it was the biggest movie, and this movie's fucking amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. It's about these two revolutionaries in like Indian history, but it's like this almost like a superhero movie, and it's huge. It was like nominated for Oscar it got robbed at the Oscar. It was nominated for best song, I think. But the main guy, what's his name? Ram Charan. I'm probably saying that wrong. He's one of the main two leads. I like both of them, but his performance is just amazing. He plays this. I don't want to give away too much, but it's amazing to watch these guys because they know like this martial arts that I don't know what it is. It's like some sort of Indian martial arts, and so they're like action heroes. But then they break out into dance numbers. So they're phenomenal singers, they're phenomenal dancers. They're great actors, and it's of course it's a little over the top, but it's like a different style, but it's still like it's a little campy, but it's like amazing. And then they're like kick-ass like action guys. It's both of the main guys are great, but I like him in particular. It's just like it's a melodrama, it's very theatrical. So yeah, RRR the movie is amazing. It's my parents were like, "What are you showing us?" And they were like, "This is amazing."
Okay, great.
So
great, Lisa.
Oh my God, so many. But what's been on my mind recently is there's going to be a reboot of one of my favorite TV series. It's going to be a reboot of Friday Night Lights, which I have intense feelings about. Like, I don't know why. It's going to be the same. Peter Berg is still at the helm of it. It's going to be probably a lot of the same, creators, but Friday Night Lights has such a place in my heart because it was a mostly improvised series. It was fast and loose. It allowed the actors to just really do some incredible things, and the interplay between Kyle Chandler and Connie Britton as Coach and Tammy.
Yes.
I mean, it's if you know, you know. I mean, if you know, you know. And to see performances of such like a married couple who is just such partners, and yet he's a man's man and she's a gal's gal, and just that interplay. It's just an incredible performance. And I remember I went to work for the casting director who cast that series only because she cast that series. I was so in love with it. And I remember walking into her storage room and she had just like binder after binder of all the original scripts. And it was like being in church again, Alfred mentioned church. It was like seeing the original Bible, like, oh my God, I'm just,
phenomenal show.
Just a phenomenal show. And like everybody who cut their teeth on that show, from Jesse Plemons to Zach Gilford. I mean, like talk about discovering raw talent. I mean, in the stories of Taylor Kitsch, how he even got, this kid from nowhere, Canada, getting a series regular role based on a self-tape back in the day when self-tapes were not a thing. I mean, the casting stories about that series are incredible. And so that's like my touchstone. Like it's just a series that I go back to thinking about, and the trajectory of those actors who would not be where they are today without those roles. So
that's a good one, Mike. We watched that pilot when Mike and I were working on a script for some years ago, and we watched that pilot as remember that.
I watched the whole series. That was my first time watching it. Was then, but that's such a phenomenal show. I mean, it's such a good show.
Okay, thank you so much, Lisa. You're great.